Uh,
Do you want? I'm just going to turn on the recording now. We can kind of casually get started. And I've got them up here too. I mean, I think I'd like to keep it casual though too. I don't want it to make it. I don't want it to be like a pure interview. So it's just a helpful guide for me to, so we can kind of shape the conversation. But are you good for an hour? Is that time okay for you?
I'm good till like 40 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. I just got something up at 6:30 my time, but 45 minutes should be okay.
All right, that'll work. Yeah. Okay. No, that sounds good. I mean, why don't we start? Like, I haven't heard your story. I know you're originally from Malaysia. Is that right? Do you want to start there? And why don't you share your name and currently what you're doing, and then we can kind of go back to the beginning.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I'm Joe. I'm the CEO and co-founder of HeyOrca. And I'm from Malaysia. I've been here in Newfoundland for 10 years now. It's kind of crazy. Wow. So this is my 10th year in Newfoundland. Came here for school and then sort of like just stayed on. And, you know, my journey with HeyOrca is very non-intentional. Definitely didn't see myself as an entrepreneur. Probably the furthest idea that I had. I always thought I was going to work for an investment bank or being an economist. That was sort of my goal. And I thought I was
I'm curious because I saw I looked back to your work term experience and things, and like, it wasn't obvious that, at least with your experience, that you were going to go into entrepreneurship. But it's like, that is one thing I'm curious to understand how you ended up where you have.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how sort of life structures your journey. And I think like people, you know, to make the most of your opportunities, you got to be flexible. And early in your life, I think you can take a lot of risks because you have nothing to lose. So, you know, at that time, I had a general goal, you know, getting my degree and working for a company. And the company that I was thinking about, you know, the type of company is like a multinational company, you know, joining the ranks and sort of work my way out. But the work terms actually helped me discover what I didn't like. So people talk about like finding your passion. I always say that it's less about finding your passion and more about finding what you don't like, and you start eliminating, you know, things that you don't like, and you're a step closer to your passion. And that's what the work term sort of helped me do. So it helped me eliminate it that, number one, I don't like to work at big companies. You know, those work terms were great because they introduced me to that environment, and I knew that that's not what I liked. And then after that, the second thing, the technical skills though that it gave me, somehow I kept getting work terms that required me to work on databases. And I had to learn, you know, the different like parent-child relationship, object-to-object relationship to be able to structure their databases. That really helped me go into tech because I had to work with Salesforce. And then I just, you know, got more familiar with technology and web applications. And that's sort of like how I got into tech, I guess, through my work term as well. So I started eliminating the big companies. And then my final work term, I started to, you know, take a chance on a smaller company. And I found that I actually really like a small company.
Okay. So I guess if we go even back a little bit further, like what brought you to Newfoundland or what brought you to choose Min? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so in Malaysia, people usually go overseas. They either go to the UK or Australia because it's closer. And we're also part of the Commonwealth, and that's probably the most known countries. Grade 12 in Malaysia, I actually did an Ontario secondary school diploma. And you get to choose whether or not you want to continue with the A levels, which is the British system, or you can explore whatever you want. I chose the Canadian curriculum because my parents actually went to Canada for school. So I was just curious about what it looked like. I really liked it. And
so did you go to school? And I saw on your did you go to school in Ontario, or was it some kind of like remote program you did in Malaysia?
Yeah, so they set up like a school in Malaysia. And then so you can get your grade 12 degree or like diploma from there. And then we were basically doing like the Ontario curriculum. And then the teachers are flown from like, you know, Ontario. So it's like a Canadian program over there. And that's sort of like introduced me to, a little bit about the Canadian education.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And then so that got you a taste of Canada, I guess, and then you started applying from schools, from universities from there.
Yeah, and then I just saw Memorial being, so cheap. I actually thought it was an error, because it was like everyone's like 30,000, 20,000, like for an international student, right, per year. And then like Memorial had 8,000. I was like, what? She's $8,000. So I went to the counselor. I said, is there an error here? Because maybe it's missing a 1 or a 2 in front of it. And she's like, no, it's $8,000 and it has work terms, so you could technically pay your way through school. And then I was like, sweet. And then I started looking at what sold me was a Newfoundland tourism video. I was like, wow, this is like a mystical place. This is awesome. And I grew up in a city. So I always thought I was going to live in a city, right? I'm a city kid. I really like the city. But at the same time, I took chances. So, I thought to myself, let's take a chance here. Go to this place, Newfoundland. I've heard of it once in school about the fisheries industry. That's how I heard about it. I said, I'll take a chance on this. It's 4 to 5 years, and then I'll go back to the city. So, at least I get to experience something. And so that's how I came to Newfoundland.
That's interesting. And then, so you kind of talked about the time. Was it like, when did you, like, because you did all these work terms, and then did you start HeyOrca right out of school, like as soon as you graduated, or did you go to work for a period of time, or did you start right away?
Yeah, I started right away. I remembered I took an interview with Pepsi, and I just wanted to just interview, because my plan was actually to go back to Malaysia, but I had a 3-year visa. I was like, I'll just go interview and just see sort of like how I do in these interviews. I went to Pepsi and went through the interview, and at the end he asked me, what do you want to do in 5 years time, or where do you see yourself? And I told him, I see myself having my own business. At that time, I was pretty aware that I really want to start a business or join a startup. And then he basically said, this interview is great, but that's a wrong answer. I think you should go start your own business. And then I was like, he said, never tell people that if you want to get a job. I was like, yeah, but I didn't want to get a job, right, in the back of my head. So I said, that's actually not a bad idea. And then I met Sahan, my co-founder, at my final year university. So we started brainstorming a couple ideas. We started with one idea, and it sort of pivoted and changed into HeyOrca. So we didn't really set out to start HeyOrca. We set out to start something else. And then the market told us that there was a better demand for something else. And then we just pivoted over there.
Interesting. Was there any other, I know there's some entrepreneurship centers. I'm not sure what they're called in the business school, but there's the MCE and the engineering school. Was there any other institutional things that encouraged you to do it, or was it more just like self-guided or kind of intuitively what brought you there?
At that time when we started, we were very lonely. The entrepreneurship department wasn't even there. Like right now, you have so many resources: MCE, Propel, Genesis, whatever. Right over there, during our time, there's only what is that program? That business program, the one at school. Can't remember. Enactus, yeah. Enactus had this Launchpad program, but it's not really a program. Like it basically is a space, and then you get to work with other Genesis Center clients. But what really helped me and really propelled me to pursue entrepreneurship is actually YouTube. I started consuming an unhealthy amount of documentaries around startups or tech companies. And then The Verge actually started my interest, because I actually, I was very averse to technology, believe it or not. I carried a flip phone until 4th year university. Everyone was using Snapchat. I had no idea how to use Snapchat, because I always wanted to be, that guy that don't want to follow the trends. So I had my flip phone until the 4th year university. But then I had to get a smartphone because I accidentally washed my phone and put my phone in my pants, and then it went into a washer. And I was like, cool, I'll just go get a smartphone. And then I started becoming very intrigued with smartphone, because I was pretty blown away by what, mobile computing could do. I could run web applications. I could run full websites, could render Flash videos on mobile. And I started watching YouTube videos about, phone reviews, basically. That's how I started. And then The Verge created this series, and you can still find the series online. It's called Small Empires. It's by Alexis Ohanian from the Reddit guy. So and he has this tagline, which I always remembered and really inspired me a lot. It was, we live in a world where you don't need permission to get started. Anyone can create small empires, right? And basically technology is democratizing everything. Internet's making the world flat. You can challenge any brand that you want. And that really spoke to me. And I got pretty pumped about it. The whole thing, the only thing I could think of in my last year of university is starting or joining a tech company. Because of this sort of like idea that you can be anywhere. All you need is a laptop, Wi-Fi, great idea, great team, and then you execute. And so when I met Sahan, I met a person that would like to start something as well. And and then we went for it because we had nothing to lose. And another thing that he advised his viewers is that if you're out of college, it's probably the best time to start because you had nothing to lose. When you're 30, 40, man, you have like mortgage to pay and everything, and you have a higher quality of life. It's really hard to get back in. And so I said, that makes sense. And I had nothing to lose because if it fails, I just go home to Malaysia. That was my plan. So instead of going back to Malaysia, which was a 100% guarantee, I can always go back to Malaysia, but I cannot always start a startup. And so I just took that chance and just went for it. Yeah, so that's how it started. Your AirPod. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I had two sets of AirPods and the other set connected. Well, it's my wife. I'm using my wife's because mine were dead, and then mine reconnected.
Yeah.
My bad.
No problem.
No, I mean, that sounds fascinating. Like, I had a similar obsession. I mean, I had probably a lifelong obsession with tech, but never thought I'd find myself working in Silicon Valley either. But 2 or 3 years ago, you get the opportunity to do it. It's pretty exciting. And I do think, I mean, the internet in general, but YouTube specifically, like, it creates this like window to these worlds. You think about the world, or I think about Newfoundland like 50 years ago, like knowing what opportunities existed outside of your realm was just like besides reading a newspaper was pretty limited, And now it can make people probably unhappy. You can see so much. It's like overwhelming to see how, like, maybe what everyone else is doing or what opportunities that you're missing out on in some way. But it can be equally inspiring too, to go do something because you see the opportunity, or especially with technology, it does democratize. And even like one of the challenges in Newfoundland, I think, has always been its remoteness. And I think technology, or specifically like software, really takes a lot of that away. You don't need to put it on a truck or a boat to get it out, and that can really change things.
Yeah, 100%.
What do you think? What's been the biggest challenge you faced so far with the company starting HeyOrca?
For me, it's probably the maturity, like the different stages of maturity and dealing with like rapid growth with limited amount of talent in the province. So that's probably the biggest challenge. I think like there's no problems getting started in Newfoundland. I think when you want to scale and at the rate that, if you raise VC financing at the rate that they demand, or you have to scale, it gets very challenging because everything starts to break. So you need like, a new set of like knowledge or expertise. You just can't get it here. It's just really hard. And I think the biggest challenge as well is that in Newfoundland, currently, I think like we'll get there eventually. Having a job is just a job. Like it's not a craft. Very few people see the career as a craft. Like, I'm perfecting a craft. I'm dedicating a lot of my life to craft. And I don't see that as work-life balance, like, interfering with work-life balance, because it is something that intersects with my passion. But very few people see their jobs like that, right? And I think, like, maybe my theory is that maybe only 10% or like maybe even 1% of the population, the working population, see it like that. But then when you have a smaller working population, 1% means like very few people. But in Toronto, let's say you'll be able to find a lot more of these people in absolute numbers. So I think that's probably our biggest challenge. Like, starting wasn't that big of a challenge. I think like managing the next stage of growth is probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I bet. Do you look for talent? Do you have any like remote offices or people that you get, like key talents working in Toronto or other major centers, or do you try and keep it local and in person?
Yeah, we sort of like view. It's been like a couple of iterations, and I think so. We do. Yeah, short answer, we do. We have a sort of Toronto team right now. They work remotely from a co-working space in Toronto. But we've gone through a lot of like iterations and lessons learned. Not all of them worked out. But the way we structure it right now is we looked at two things. One, supply and demand. Where's the supply of this particular talent that we want? And then the other one is the types of people that we want, and sort of the environment that they're in that allows them to do that job. So just to give you an example, for customer support, for example, we want to optimize for empathy, optimize for a really good, service. And we believe that we can find those people here in Newfoundland. Actually, Newfoundland's probably the cream of the crop when it comes to that. Yeah. And that's why, I made a decision that we need to find talents of customer service in Newfoundland, because we're a world-class team, served with world-class software, served with Newfoundland hospitality, is what I like to tell people. Yeah. And I want that to be here. But when you talk about salespeople, you need to be like, more competitive, more shark-like, I guess, or orca-like. You have to sort of like, we have to go out market to Toronto to find that type of person that's very competitive. So at HeyOrca, we have, a set of values. So cheers, competitive, humble, empathetic, execution focused, resourceful, and then self-improvement. And sort of depending on your role, we optimize for one of that values as well. So for example, for sales, we'll optimize for competitiveness. For support, we'll focus on empathy, right? And then we looked at the market, like where can we get the supply of these people, and then which environments allow them to be better at this value that we want to showcase.
That's interesting. Just like a bit of the opposite question, what's been easier about starting a company than you thought it would be, that you probably thought was going to be terrifying or difficult, that actually ended up being easier once you got started?
What is easier than I thought? I think just launching the product is easier than I thought, or like getting that over that barrier of like, okay, you're actually going to start a company. I remember I was in Sahan's apartment, and then, he talked about like, hey, let's turn this into a company, because we were debating whether or not this should be an app or a, full-blown company. And then we just made a decision. Yeah, this is going to be a company. Let's get incorporated. And I think like that's probably the biggest mental barrier, is that, wow, I'm going to start a company right now. And it's like almost like this big deal kind of thing, but it's actually not. It's just, just making it legal and making it official that you're actually serious about this. Then the hard part comes. But a lot of people think that, I think I thought that, making the decision, getting everything in place, all the logistic stuff is the hard part. But no, it's actually like getting through the mental barrier that you're going to start a company. That's the easy part. The hard part comes when you have to validate your idea and, try to get people to use your product. And yeah, that's probably what I would say.
I saw like your pinned Twitter post this morning to founders about like the marathon versus the sprint. to
Yeah.
like, can you comment on that? And like, cause I think I had actually like GlobalNL is not officially incorporated yet. And for some, I think I have this mental barrier about incorporating it because it makes it more formal or scarier. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we've been working on it for 2 years. And I don't know if we really need to for what we're
Yeah.
doing, but it is more of what I've learned is you kind of have these spurts of success and things, but it is the persistent effort over a long period of time where you start to see this like snowball effect. But I'd be curious to get your perspective on that tweet.
Yeah, like for me, when I started HeyOrca, I didn't have like a vision for, a gigantic, like I don't even know what I was doing, right? And that's the beauty of it, is that, when you're naive, you just take your chances. But when I started HeyOrca, it was really a canvas for me to learn. I wanted to have a vehicle where I can apply my learning. So like, read an article or watch a podcast, and tomorrow I can come to work or whatever, and apply that to my project. And that's sort of like why I started HeyOrca. When we raised sort of the VC financing, to me, I always saw that as maybe a faster way to get to the outcome that I want, which is, maybe an acquisition or something, along the way, right? And in my mind, it will happen very fast, like 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, 5 years. And then after that, I'm off to the next thing. My tweet over there is just like, if growth is your primary outcome, or like that's what you're looking for, that would probably sustain you for like 3 years tops. Like if growth is what is driving you to start a company, like personal growth, it probably can sustain you for 3 years or 5 even. But you need a bigger reason why these companies should exist, right? And it requires a lot of patience as well. And that means that you got to really believe in the future that you're creating. So I think like as young people, we always have this idea and we're like, let's give it a try. And we get like super hyped up about it. And that's sort of this hype cycle, right? But bad times will hit or hard times will hit. And then you start saying, well, if it's growth, why am I here? I could go work for something else or like start another one, right? And still achieve the same result of growth. And for me, it's really discovering HeyOrca's mission and then being patient and knowing that sometimes things take longer than it is. And that's okay as long as, we're making progress. And that's sort of like my note to myself.
Right. So what is the mission, or where do you see beside, is it not that it's just this app or the tool that you're building, or is it bigger than that? I'm curious to know how you see it as what your mission is at the company.
Yeah, our mission at HeyOrca is to help marketing agencies take back today. So what we mean by that is that we believe that humans should focus on things that humans are uniquely capable to do, and software should focus on things that software is uniquely capable to do. And we believe that with humans, we are capable on 2 things, or especially if you're in the service industry, you should focus on 2 things. Number 1 is your client relationship. No amount of AI can take away human-to-human client relationship, especially when you're service intensive, like an agency, like a creative agency. It's just all relationship based. So you need to focus most of your time on the client side of things so that, you're retaining your clients, you're actually creating a happy customer base. The second one is knowledge acquisition, which is, constantly leveling up your game to make sure that your craft that you're providing or deliverables that you're providing to your clients are always, at the top of its game. What you can then use software to automate or, help you take back your day is all the, redundancies like, compiling information, getting approvals, publishing, logging information in one place. Those are the things that software can help. And so we want to help them take back the day by taking away the logistical issues so that they can focus on their clients and focus on their work, right? Those 2 things. And so that's really the mission of HeyOrca, is that we want to help them, save more time so that they can put that back into, their business or even in their life in general. And the thesis here is that if we can prove it out on a service-intensive industry like an agency, we can then, in 10 years' time, say we're helping not only marketing agencies take back the day, we're helping service businesses take back the day. Because fundamentally, it's built on knowledge and also client relationships, and then you have that logistical issue, so operational issues, right? And software can help automate a lot of that.
Right. So do you see it being applicable, or like the framework for the tool being useful outside of marketing agencies, or is the plan to keep it focused on that for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I definitely see a potential beyond agencies. Again, this hypothesis is, um, betting on that, there is a need for the operational automation, which I believe so. But for now, like our focus is on agency. So agency is sort of a proxy for our experiment. If we can prove it out in the most service-intensive industry in the world, then we can realistically replicate that for other service-based industries, right? Like legal or accounting or whatever that needs client relationship as well as knowledge delivery, and then we can automate the operational stuff.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Just moving on, I have like a different kind of series of questions, maybe outside of HeyOrca a little bit. And some of these I'm stealing from other, actually, I was going to ask you this first. Do you listen to podcasts, and do you have any personal favorites of what you listen to or read?
Yeah, I go through phases sometimes, but I used to listen to This Week in Startups. I just like it. Just some people don't like how Jason Calacanis sort of interviews, but I find it hilarious. Like the guy's just so straightforward, and sometimes can come off as a jerk, but he's just being super blunt. And I just enjoy it. And he usually gets really good guests on, and he prepares for his interviews too. And you can tell, and he really is very knowledgeable around sort of the subject matter expertise around startups and growing startups, and getting guests that sort of resonates with those stuff. So that's probably one podcast that I would, constantly listen to. And then HBR, Harvard Business Review, just to be a better manager. I find their podcast pretty good.
That's good. I mean, there's so much good stuff out there now. Like I almost want to have too many podcasts that are too good. Yeah. Tim Ferriss is one of my favorites that I listen to. I don't know if you've read any of his books or listened to his. He's got some really good ones. One of his, I've got a few questions he uses. He said, if you could put a billboard anywhere, what would it say and where would you put it? And this is not advertising for HeyOrca, but what message kind of would you put out to the world, and maybe where would you put it?
Yeah, I'll put it in MUN, right? I'll put a big billboard in the business building, especially, and say, accounting doesn't need to be your life. There's something more exciting beyond this degree. Middle management doesn't have to be your life. Get out of the books and go do real stuff out there. Something like that. And just just encourage people to not be complacent. And I think in the business faculty, I came from business, and we're just so complacent about things, and we're just not thinking for ourselves. And I really admire how engineering actually thinks about the department, because it's about creating things, it's making things real. And for us, we're just we want to be consultants and write business plans. And it's very frustrating just to see that being the status quo. And I would want to, sort of champion that, sort of that GlobalNL mindset. It's the world's so much bigger than what you think, right? And you need to be able to have that creator mindset, if you know what I mean, that you are here to create something, you're actually adding value versus just taking a job and being middle management.
Yeah, I get that. I actually had that question, I think, earlier on, or I meant to ask it, was I wish the engineering and business schools at MUN would work closer together, because I think they need each other. The engineers have some of the knowledge in building, but there's a lot of fundamental things that the business school has. And I wish they'd work I always think the Enactus team or and maybe the Hyperloop teams or some of those teams should work closer together. Do you have any thoughts on how those schools could work together better?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, it comes into the DNA of the faculties. I think the reason why it's not so compatible right now is because the engineering has one kind of DNA and the business has one kind of DNA. I think on the engineering side, the DNA is always creation, because fundamentally in engineering is about how do you create something, right? How do you build something? The fundamental DNA on the business side is how do you fill a job? How do you fill a job? Like, how do you teach a student something so they can go get a job?
Preparing you for your first job. Yeah.
So that's like a fundamental clash in DNA between those two. And also, and from that, you have very different messages being taught in those two schools. And so I think Enactus would be a good bridge, because Enactus, you're actively creating something as a student organization. But if we can sort of like have more of that proxy, sort of more of that knowledge being spread into the business side of things, and say, hey, you need to start thinking from, a creation first standpoint versus like an analyzing standpoint. That's what, I think would wake people up. I think that's how
I find that really interesting. Yeah, because like a lot of those tools, like the management tools or accounting and things, are really important to be able to create and build things maybe in a sustainable way. But they're not really a means in themselves, right? They're kind of tools you can use to build things, especially in maybe a more sustainable fashion. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
and I'm not like sort of like, talking bad about the business in general. What I'm saying is the business faculty is geared up for professional, like those professional jobs that is already established. They're not sort of like geared up for things that are maybe not established yet, right? Like you think about like accounting, and these accounting is probably the major one that is popular in business, but the whole sort of culture is geared towards that. I think they're making like pretty good strides in introducing other variety. I think they just introduced like an investment fund for students in finance, so that's great. But at the end of the day, it also depends on the student's ambition, right? If their ambition is to be an accountant, then yeah, I mean that's great. But we need more of those creator types of people as well.
Yeah, I kind of have the same. It's not about making everybody an entrepreneur, but there probably is a subset of people that want to be, but there's no outlet, so there's no like forum for them to do that maybe now. And I think even I've said, I've tried to encourage a bunch of the engineering students to work in tech or to come to Silicon Valley. And it's not like I think everybody should, but those who are interested should have the opportunity, and a lot of times like there's just been so limited opportunity in the past that they just didn't think it was possible or just didn't know how to get started.
The way I think about it as well is that, how can we encourage first principles thinking, which is like questioning why the status quo is what it is. And business faculty in general is just not it's just not embedded in it, because like you're being taught, this is how you do things. This is how the standards are. This is the GAP, GAAP, process that you need to follow. Okay, follow it. Yeah. This is organizational behavior. Make sure you memorize all of this and regurgitate it in the exam. So there's not a lot of questioning why. Why are we doing this? Why are these things, the way it is? Well, in engineering, fundamentally, you have to question why, because you're building something. Again, like this is just me just looking at how engineering is run versus like how business is run. And I think like it's fundamentally like different DNAs.
Yeah, I think even physics, like engineering is mostly the study of physics, and like physics is very first principles by nature. And I think you're right. There's some of it kind of forced just based on that. Okay, I have a few other kind of random questions. What is your favorite book, or maybe a different way to ask is what book have you gifted most?
I haven't gifted a lot of books this year, to be honest. except from the Bible, which I just want to give it to my friends. But maybe the book that I'll recommend.
What book have you? Yeah,
I'll recommend this book. It's been game changing for me. Crucial Conversations. I don't know if you heard of it.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's basically a book about how to deal with high stakes situations, and come up on the other end positive. And it talks about how crucial conversations happen every single day, without us realizing that the conversation just became crucial. And crucial conversations usually happen during water cooler chats or like, just impromptu chats that, got heated or escalated, and we don't realize that that's a crucial conversation. And it sort of like help us like navigate our way through those conversations, and so that we come up with a positive outcome. So it's been really good, especially if you're a manager or a new manager. I definitely recommend that one. It's a very easy read.
Cool. I'll definitely check it out. What another one? Why do you track yearly progress? I see you posting on Twitter frequently like these yearly progress. I'm just curious why do you find that motivating, or something just to make sure you don't lose track of the time, or what?
Yeah. So I actually saw this yearly progress thing through Scott Stevenson. He's one of the founders here too, and he retweeted one of their tweets, and then I sort of just started following it. But the reason why I'm tracking it is because I just realized the scarcity of time, right? Like if you think about it, a year is not very long, and we need to start planning. So I'm very comfortable with chaos. I always say that I identify more as a cowboy. I like the Wild West. I don't like being the sheriff. I like just, exploring frontiers. But the thing is that when you get to a certain point in your company, you need to start planning your town and sort of like balancing out. And that's sort of a reminder to me, hey, we're 15% through the year now, and there's only 4 quarters to play. So there's not a lot of time. So we want to make sure that we're iterating, but at the same time executing our plan and learning from them. Because if not, like time will get away from us, right? So that's sort of just a reminder to myself, and hopefully other people as well, that time is ticking, and we're 15% through the year right now.
Yeah, I get it. Especially once you start, a career or a company, like the time does tend to slip away or move quickly. You don't realize how it's going by. I know we're kind of coming up on, it's like 1:45 here. The last part I wanted to ask you, and I've asked a few of the guests I've interviewed, is actually about GlobalNL. And we're really still trying to figure out what and who we are, I guess. And actually, a few of the people that are involved now, we're trying to put some additional work into kind of redefining the mission of the group or the initiative. But what advice? I guess I could ask it a couple of ways. Like, what advice do you have for GlobalNL? Where do you think we could add the most value to its members? Either to people like you that are living in Newfoundland, or even if you have a perspective on how we can, connect the community outside of Newfoundland. It's all kind of the same initiative anyways, but I'm curious to see what your thought is.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is great right now, right? Like having like a Slack group where people are actively communicating with one another. In terms of ideas, I feel like a lot of it. And you're doing this all the way from California, so like hats off to you for that. I think like the next iteration is really the community here in Newfoundland. I think it's up to us, and I'm speaking to myself too. Like we just get so bogged down with work in our own silos, and just to make sure that we're not creating our own silo. The community is already so small. We need to break those silos down further instead of, being super focused on just what we do. That would be like my advice to myself in terms of like helping GlobalNL go further. Because I think like the groundwork it's set quite well already. And what now needs to happen is the community needs to somehow get involved on a larger scale, right? I don't know what it looks like in terms of the solution, but that's sort of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I think that's I feel like I'm confident now that the traction exists in at least like the community. Every time I put effort into it or others do, like the interest and the engagement is there, and the community people we have engaged is really positive. And it is kind of a question of how do you scale it, and some of its resources, what we have access to right now, and some of the time constraints. And we might consider even like raising some money or some government funding to help us do that. But I am trying to figure out kind of what, where we can't be all things to all people either. and I'm still trying to kind of suss that out. And
Yeah.
yeah.
That's actually a good point, because we're so small, like specific, that you want to tackle it one step. Like, what's our first beachhead to GlobalNL, right? Like, what's the first beachhead? It doesn't mean that GlobalNL's mission is just for tech, but that seems to be, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this seems to be like the most obvious beachhead, and just attacking it that way to further the bigger mission. So the bigger, missions connecting Newfoundlanders with, the global Newfoundland community, right, around the world. And using, tech as the interest beachhead. And then after that, once it's done, and, sort of expanding from there. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. And that's where exactly along the lines I have. It's not meant to be tech forever, but it's kind of the industry I work in. It's the geography I'm in. And it's probably where I can have the biggest impact. It's also where my interest and passion is. And so I think it is just a great place to start. And once we, maybe tackle that beachhead, I think it'll be easier to propagate or to go to different areas from there.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I sort of this is how I think successful organizations or companies do, is they know that the total value that they're creating is bigger than the beachhead. Right. It's the beachhead is just a means to that value, like storage. And so, it's understanding that the beachheads takes time to develop. And it's sort of like also what they call the, bowling pin strategy. You knock one down and you go to the next one, because ultimately the goal is not just to create a tech community, but it's to create a community where, all Newfoundlanders can be connected. And we start with tech, and then maybe we go to marketing, and then we go to, finance, and then wherever is the most traction. And you just and then go to market is so clear now, right? Like at the end of the day, people come for the tech conversations, people come for the finance conversation, but they stay for the relationships.
Yeah, exactly. And because I feel like a lot of it, I just again, about this podcast, I mean, I've gotten to meet, and every time I post a new LinkedIn post, I get one or two new people reach out to me. And I'm really lucky to have gotten to connect with all these people, but it's just going to be fascinating to see that propagate, right? I don't want it to be centered around me by any means, but how do we start to propagate that, to have those connections to be more organic outside of a few of the key people that are involved right now? I think a little bit of that has started, and I share a few stories about connecting Jeremy to people. It's the compound effect of connections is really powerful too, where I've introduced Jeremy to somebody, and then, then that person's introduced him to three more people, and it's just really, it is a really powerful thing. Once you get, and I think that part itself, either the two things I think we can add the most value is actually those connections, to making it visible, or making it easier for people to connect with each other. And then also just recognizing and telling stories of Newfoundlanders or other people that are passionate about the province. Because there's also a lot of really successful or interesting people that are, I guess, successful in hiding. They're not infamous, but they've done really fascinating things. And that's one of the main things I want to explore with this podcast too, is kind of getting some of those people out of hiding, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, making them more visible. Hey, I just want to end this with a question. I know I've been pretty silent on sort of the GlobalNL scene, but I definitely want to ask, what is which way can I contribute to it right now, in my capacity, you think?
I think so. I think I already asked a small, something that comes to top of mind. We are looking for a social media coordinator. And so I'm not asking you to do that specific job, but once we find the person, if you having people like you maybe periodically do a GlobalNL specific post. I think you maybe a volunteer before, once a month or every 6 weeks, just to put together a short tweet or a LinkedIn post that kind of either shares some content or your perspective on something we're working on. I think having a bunch of people share, basic, or even a blog post or something, And that feels like a bit more manageable, where it might take you 30 or 40 minutes to put it together once a month or every 6 weeks. That, I don't know, that's something that comes to top of mind.
Got it. Yeah.
Is there anything else, or did you have something different, or?
No, that's exactly it, right? I think like what you're sort of like, yeah, like pointing to is this community driven. How do we turn this from, Greg pushing the boulder up the hill to like now more people are pushing the boulder with you, and then hopefully it rolls down the hill soon, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be like content. It could even be a question, right? Like it could just be like maybe you help start a conversation around some topic that you're interested in or something, and we just. But yeah, the diversifying the voice, I think, is something I'd like to do, and to get more people engaged in that. I think what we need, though, is I need a person that can help kind of coordinate some of those activities. I don't really have the bandwidth to do that right now. I don't know if you have any advice. Like I've kind of posted that. I'm hoping to get someone from the business school, like a young student from Enactus or something like that, that could step in to kind of run some of our social media content. I don't know if you have any advice on how to tackle that.
I'm actually going through the same thing on my side on HeyOrca. So we're trying to go from like a HeyOrca kind of specific content stream to now how do we make sure that it's involving our community. So hopefully I'll learn something from this, and I'm managing it right now. I'm actually managing the program. So I'm hoping to learn something from this. So like some of the things that we said that we will do is like, let's take away things that are not community focused, which means there's no, it's not about people. It's not about their stories. We don't want to be posting those stuff. Let's source content, not from ourselves, but from our customers and our community. And let's start telling their story. And then all we need to do is like one post a week. And hopefully when people come to our Instagram page, they can see a collection of stories that speaks to the larger mission of HeyOrca, which is, helping agencies take back the day and being their best friend. That whole narrative. Yeah, I guess all that to say that I'm still learning myself too.
Okay, gotcha. We'll figure it out. We've struggled most with that, but we'll get there. We kind of have some decent traction on social media, but and LinkedIn is kind of the primary one we're using right now, which it's been a good tool. All right, well, Joe, I really appreciate the time. This was really good, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. So thanks for carving out the time on this cold Newfoundland day.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Let me think about how I can, participate more in GlobalNL. But I really enjoyed this 1 hour, talking about GlobalNL and Newfoundland in general. Thanks so much.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Joe. Take care. Have a good weekend.
See you, man.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.